All right, all right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Erica Walls of Inspire to Excel Career Services, and I'm also a coach on Coach Connect. I am thrilled to be here with you today to help to facilitate this discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to ensure that all voices are heard, and intersectionality, I should have said. So, throughout today's conversation on intersectionality, we're going to be covering everything from what an intersectional identity is to practical steps for supporting all people and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard and valued. So, I'm super duper excited to be joined by Quinnie Wong, who is Global Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Pfizer. Welcome, Quinnie.
Hey, thank you, Erica. Maybe I should introduce myself.
Please.
Yes, I'm Wong, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And to be super inclusive, I'm going to give a visual description of how I look. I am a Chinese woman with dark black hair. I am 5 feet 2 inches tall and officially confirmed yesterday by my doctor that I have shrunk. I'm now 5 foot two, not 5 foot 2.5. I have an invisible small disability. I cannot sit in normal chairs to work. I have to use ergonomic furniture or my whole back will act up. So I like standing as well. So that is me.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction and how appropriate for this session that we are having. You just taught me something new that's really valuable. So thank you for that. On the topic of diversity, I'm really interested in knowing where everybody is. We all may have done something like this earlier today, but can you all just put in the chat what city are you in? Assuming that you're in the U.S. or outside, where are we? Where are we? All right, I see Chicago coming through, Dallas, Texas. All right, Raleigh, Denver, Brazil. Hello, Brazil. Shout out. That's wonderful. Well, as they keep rolling in, Charlotte, Jersey, Virginia Beach, let's go ahead and get started, shall we, Quinnie?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So let's start out with the basics. Intersectionality is a phrase that some people know of, but certainly not everyone. So can you tell us what intersectionality is and how do our intersectional identities shape our experiences?
Absolutely. I want to model what you just did, Erica. I'm going to have folks type into the chat. What do you think intersectionality means?
Like that.
All right. I'm going to take a look before I dive in. I can see folks are still sharing where they're from,
Yes,
which
they
is great.
are. Brooklyn is in the house.
Yeah.
California.
So the next question, the question I'm asking now is, what does intersectionality mean to you? Okay. Ways where the same multiple Venn diagrams, multiple intersecting identities, overlap of identities, meeting people where they are, where diversity, multiple identities intersect. Thank you. So keep them coming in. So I'm going to start by sharing with you the origin of the term intersectionality. So it's actually coined by a law professor. I think a lot of you may have heard of her, Kimberly Crenshaw. It was actually back in 1989 when Professor Crenshaw shared a paper about race and sex discrimination. So she shared 3 law cases where Black women could not sue as a Black woman. They could sue as Black or they could sue as women, but they could not sue as Black women. So this is what she said. The court decided that efforts to bind together both racial discrimination and sex discrimination claims, rather than sue on the basis of each separately, would be unworkable. So that's back in 1989. And then the concept became really popular, and it became added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2015. And then in 2016, Professor Crenshaw shared another example in one of her TED Talks. So I think this makes it even more obvious what intersectionality is. So there was this Black woman. She sued a car manufacturers because the manufacturer would not hire her. So she sued as a Black woman. And the manufacturer's case was, no, we have hired Black people, we have hired female people, so no, we're not discriminating against you. So this female Black women then proved that this company, of course, they have hired Black people, but they were all doing mechanical jobs. They have hired women, they were all doing clerical jobs. So here's the intersectionality. You can only see a Black woman either as Black or as a woman. You don't see her as a Black woman. So I think this is the interesting concept of intersectionality. Let me give you another example, completely different, but I think we can also relate to that. It's some research that I'm going to share. I think we all have been talking about the gender pay gap. So in 2022, American women typically make 82 cents per dollar that men make. But if you look at women by different age groups, so younger women from 25 to 34, they actually make 92 cents per dollar men make. If you then look at older women, 35 to 44, and then 45 to 54, they make 83% that men make of the same age group. Now, if you go above this age group, it drops to 70%. Oh, sorry, it drops to 79%. So you can see not all women have the same experience. Now, if I think about Black women, what do they make? They make 7% as much as white men doing the same job.
Can you give us that number again?
Yes, Black women earn 70% as much as white
70 cents for every dollar. Wow.
Yep. And Hispanic women earn even less, 65%, as much as white men make. So again, the point here is we're all women, but we have different experiences.
Absolutely, we do. There's really no such thing as this one woman's experience, much to your point. I just want to comment, if I can, the idea that we have to divide ourselves. You are who you are, and you are a multitude of things. So yeah, the idea that you have to divide woman or by race or socioeconomic, etc., it's not possible. You're just one person. And then thank you so much for bringing up the point that the 82 cents statistic is on the aggregate overall. But when we double click, we double click that data, we see that it's different for different races of women. Thank you so much for that. Let's move forward. So what are some common misconceptions about intersectionality, and how can those be addressed?
Sure. I think there are two common misconceptions, and I'll talk about both. And they're quite interesting. They're on like the two ends. One misconception is about intersectionality is all about how we find our commonality, and that's it. The other extreme is intersectionality helps us look at privilege and oppression. So I need to go back to the definition of intersectionality.
Okay.
I think what we need to be aware of is when Professor Crenshaw talked about intersectionality, it's really in the context of how we can advance equity, equality. That's really the context. So it's about privilege, it's about oppression. So one misconception about intersectionality becomes, oh, then you're looking at all these different intersection of disadvantages. So if you look at the opposite, people who have a lot of privilege, oh, then we're trying to take away their privilege so we can make it fair for everybody. So I think these are two extremes, and they're both misconceptions. So let me dig a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Let's start with the first misconception. We're looking for commonality. So maybe Erica, like you and me here, we're women, and we may discover we have a lot of similarities. We're both working women.
Sure.
And then we may discover, oh, we both like pink, or we both like a good cup of tea,
Indeed.
things like that.
Yeah.
So it's all good that we find these commonalities. But if we don't take action, how does this commonality help advance equity if we don't address maybe
Mm,
some common oppression that we face or challenges that we face? What good does it do just finding the commonality? So I think this is the
mhm,
first misconception. Now
mhm.
let's talk about the second misconception. Oh, it's almost like an inverted caste system. If you are a white man, well educated, come from well off background, you have no disability. For instance, you may say, oh, then this person has a lot of privilege. Let's try and let's take away all the privileges from this man so we can give it to other people. No, this is not what intersectionality is about. We're not taking away anything from anyone to give it to another group. Completely not. Um, I think people who have this misconception, perhaps they have the zero sum game concept. There's only this much. We have to take away something to
Yep.
give
And
to
there
another
has to
group.
be a loser if there's a winner.
Exactly. But no, of course not, right? We're talking about a growth mindset. And I think there's that saying, rising tide lifts all boats. And one of the most classic example would be for people with disability. If they're on wheelchair, if they have to go up some stairs, they can't. So build a ramp. So the intention could have been to help people with on a wheelchair, in a wheelchair, to be able to go up. But think about maybe a pregnant woman, maybe somebody who just tired. And think about a very strong, healthy person. Maybe one day he's carrying a big load and he just needs to walk on that ramp. So building this ramp doesn't take away anything from anyone. It actually benefits everyone. So I think the concept of intersectionality is really not about taking away privileges from someone. It's about recognizing the multiple compound challenges someone may face because of their multiple identities. It's about recognizing that, doing something about it, so we can really bring equity. I think those are the two misconceptions.
Yes. I love your last statement so that we can bring equity. Love that. Love that. You are very, very knowledgeable about this area. What inspired you to pursue a career in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how did you become interested in intersectionality?
Well, thank you, Erica, for asking. I would love to share my personal story. So today we are talking about intersectionality, and intersectionality is a very fancy word and difficult to say sometimes, but it's really about our multiple identities. So let me share with you. I did not share this part of my identity when I introduced myself. So I am an immigrant. I came to the US first as an international student decades ago. Um, I can still remember this scene. I was in college. English isn't my first language. And in that class, I didn't know how to say the word self explanatory. So it's like decades after, I can still see this classmate, this guy in my class who laughed at me because I didn't know how to say the word. Now, it's nothing traumatic, but there are different things during my years here in the United States as an international student that I felt I did not belong. It was very clear to me that I did not belong. I went back to Hong Kong to live. That's where I'm from. And my husband and I, we came back to live in 2003. When I first came back, this time as an immigrant, I tried so hard to hide, to cover my immigrant identity. I didn't want to be seen like I couldn't fit in. So, of course, at that time, I was not working at Pfizer. I was working at different companies. But this is what I would do. I would not want to be seen having lunch at the cafeteria with other Asian colleagues. I didn't want people to feel like I couldn't be in the mainstream. If you even complimented me on my English, on my accent, I would be so mad at myself that you could tell I did not grow up here. I would not speak up on any issues. I would just keep my head down. Let me just keep working, do a good job. This is how life's gonna be. It was exhausting, this constant trying to not bring to light that I was an immigrant. It was really by accident that I started doing DI work. Actually, it was with an employee resource group when I was at Motorola Solutions. Being in an employee resource group and ERG, I was able to swap stories with other women at that time. And it's not just about gender, again, it's intersectionality. It could be a woman who was an immigrant like myself, a woman who was in the LGBTQ community. It could be a woman who had disabilities. It's just different women. And we shared our stories. And I realized we were all trying to find that sense of belonging. And honestly, deep down, I think we all felt we were less than. And that's what's sad and not, it was just very, very exhausting. So again, one thing led to another. I started doing different work, and I had the opportunity to do DI work at Verizon. And again, one thing led to other. I started to see, hey, actually companies were really investing in finding people who were different. Because we were different, we could bring different perspectives. And they wanted people who were different. They wanted me. I knew I was not less than. I was equal. And let me close with a quick story. So I was already on the DEI team at that time at Verizon, and I was scheduled to speak it was during the early year of COVID. So I was scheduled to speak at an external event. Of course, it was virtual. And I had my speech ready, everything ready to go. And then some of you may remember there was this Atlanta spa shooting where 6 Asians were killed. So it's right after that. So when I got on the call, I basically threw away my speech. I just started talking honestly about anti-Asian hate. And then people on the call started crying. I started crying. So I think I realized I have found a voice. I have a platform now. I can really speak up. What I did not do before, now I really want to advocate. I believe with my international experience, throughout my career before DEI, I was always in marketing, communications, L&D. So I could bring all my skills to doing DEI work. That's really a life's calling. And what I want to do is I want to help others who feel like how I felt, that if we feel we were less than, I want to make sure we see, no, we're equal, we have value, we have a voice. I want to help elevate that voice. I want to be that voice for others who don't have a voice. And for people, we may talk a little bit more about this later, people who have a lot of privilege, but they want to be better allies. I want to share my story and to help them become better allies. So that's how I got into DEI.
Absolutely, absolutely. My goodness. What I believe I heard from what you said is that you went through some pretty tough experiences. And as a result of that, you gained a great deal of empathy for belonging and how important it is for people to really not just to fit in, but to feel that they belong. And also the power of sharing your story with other people and not just keeping it to yourself. I can testify about that one too. there is something so powerful about sharing with others our struggles because more than likely someone else is dealing with that too. It makes us feel far less isolated, and can help the other person like, oh, I thought it was just me. And indeed, it's not. We are all dealing with these issues, and they are important to bring up, and that's why we're talking about it now. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you,
Yeah.
Erica. And I have to say, I don't think my experience was that bad. It wasn't traumatic. I did have a term for it. Today, we might call it microaggressions, but back in the
Okay.
day, there wasn't this term. But
Hmm.
still, I think exactly like you said, it's really about having this empathy. And that's the beauty of
Yeah.
intersectionality. When we
Yeah.
can see how we may come from different backgrounds, but we may share similar experiences, similar challenges. And that's what motivates us to help one another.
Definitely, definitely. And sometimes you can have these similar experiences with people who don't necessarily look like you. So that's interesting too. Yeah. Diversity and these different um, terms. I mean, it's not just skin deep. There's a lot of dimensions, absolutely. So let me follow that up. Given all that you have learned from personal experiences, from work, etc., what advice would you give to other organizations or people who want to make their workplaces more inclusive and equitable?
Absolutely. So I believe a lot of us here today are perhaps in the HR world or doing something related to DEI, well, or at least we're in the business world. So I have 7 ideas I'd like to share. 7 is like the perfect number. So I'm going to share 7 ideas. Let me start with those who are in DEI. Um, I think a lot of us have access to data within our own company. So it's important that we really dig deeper into the data and thinking through the intersectionality lens. What I mean is, for instance, at Pfizer, we have our annual employee engagement survey. I think a lot of companies do. So when we look at the score, we can look at the score from at the enterprise level. We can look at different organizations, their scores. We can look at each leader's score even. But let us not stop there. We can dig deeper. We can look at the women in this organization score versus men. And let's not stop there. We can keep adding lenses to it. It could be women, it could be Hispanic women, it could be women in this region, it could be women at this job level, this tenure. So there are all kinds of lens filters that we can add. So my call to action for those of us in DEI or people who have access to data is to really think about intersectionality and dig deeper into the data so you can truly understand how different colleagues are experiencing at your company. And you can look at trends, look at gaps, look at needs, and come up with action strategies to help close those gaps or improve that sense of belonging if it's an engagement survey, for instance. And that brings me to a sidebar point. That's why self-ID is very important. For those of you who are your companies do promote self-identification, you go into your company's HR system, you share your demographic information confidentially, of course. This way, your company can have aggregate data of what the employee makeup is. And then they can see, maybe there are a big gap. I'm making this up. Maybe this company's Latina representation is far below Latina in the marketplace, things like
Sure.
that. So,
Underrepresented. Hmm.
yeah, so I think it's important that we all self-ID. This way, companies would have accurate aggregate data and they can do better analyses. And at the end of the day, is really to help make sure we are all supported. So that's the first idea, make use of your data, have that intersectionality lens. The second idea, when we talk about DEI, intersectionality, of course, we think about employee resource groups.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be more aware. I think a lot of ERGs today, they are aware that when we talk about, let's say, women, there are different types of women. So for example, today, like just now, right before this event at Pfizer, our women's ERG and our LGBTQ plus and allies ERG, they joined hands, joined forces, and they had an event that talked about how do LGBTQ or gay women, how do they experience Pfizer at the workplace. And that was great. The intersectionality and the two ERGs joined forces to put together this event. So I think it's important that ERGs really think about the different experiences of your
Okay.
members in your group.
Okay. I'm sorry. Quinnie, can you tell us what ERG stands for?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Employee resource groups.
Okay. Okay.
Employee resource groups,
Make sure
ERGs.
we're all on the same page.
Yeah. There you go. So
Sure, go ahead.
that's the second idea about employee resource groups. Now, the third idea is still about employee resource groups, ERGs. So a lot of times ERGs or even different teams in the company, you work with external partnerships when you do DI events or you want to do more for the community. So a quick reminder, make sure if, let's say I am in the Asian employee resource group and I found this Asian external community partner, maybe you want to do some homework to make sure this partner is supportive of all the different minorities or marginalized groups. Sometimes a partner could be great with one group, but they may have views or they may have actions that don't really lift up other groups. So you may want to be careful, do your research. So that's also about intersectionality. All right, the fourth idea, when we talk about DEI, intersectionality, a lot of times it is, of course, it's about talent and it's about finding talent. Now, I know a lot of companies have published goals, DEI goals, like X% of female leaders, X% of minorities, things like that. And when you look for talent, for instance, the talent acquisition team may say, oh, we really want to go to these events. It could be really events that have a lot of veterans or people with disability, LGBTQ plus, and sometimes the hiring managers may say, if we spend efforts with these other events, opportunities, are we diluting our efforts when we have goals? We want to reach more women, people of color, things like that. So they may feel, are we diluting our efforts? And guess what? Surprise, surprise. Among veterans, disability, LGBTQ, they also have women. They also have people of color in these communities. That is the intersectionality. So when you go find talent, don't limit yourself by any boxes, any labels. You really need to reach all kinds of groups that may not have had the opportunity to learn of your job opportunities. That's really the point of DEI, that you want to make sure you give people access to opportunities. So remember, there are, whatever groups you're thinking about, they exist across different.
And like you said, and not in these small boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is the fourth idea. Now I'll go to my fifth idea.
Okay.
So another idea related to finding talent. I think it's great that sometimes it's great to not just think about different identities, but think about the outcomes. So for instance, we know there are people who can do great work, but they may not have a certain education degree.
True.
So for instance, at Pfizer right now, today, we have already removed requirements for a degree for many roles. And if you have the equivalent experience, then you're hired. So I think that's a great way to think about intersectionality, because it's not just about people of color or gender or disability. It's not just about these different identities, but across different identities, people may not have that kind of education background, but they can totally do the job. So I think that's another great way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point and this topic of equity, let's not forget that equity is not equality. Equality is giving everyone the same thing. Equity is a recognition and being mindful that not everyone starts in the same place, if you will, or has the same opportunity to access to the education necessary, quote unquote, to get these good jobs like at Pfizer. So I think that is a great initiative, because what are we talking about here? Can you do the job or not?
Exactly. Thank you. Now, that was the fifth idea.
Great. Right.
I have two more to go in terms of ideas.
Okay. Right. You know what? Well, we'll hear those two, and then we'll go to the audience for some questions.
Sure. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the sixth idea. I talked
Mhm.
about rising tide lifts all boats, that idea, and it really applies to everything. So I want to give you another real life example from Pfizer. So think about what is talking about intersectionality, identity. What is something most personal when we think about identity? Your name. Think about for transgender colleagues, if they're in transition, now a lot of systems are tied to one's legal name. So for our transgender colleagues, while they're going through a transition, if they keep seeing their old name coming up, you can imagine how crushing it could be.
Sure.
And it's not just
Sure.
for transgender colleagues. This is really interesting. We have a colleague in Japan. They reached out and they were saying in Japan, I don't know how many of you know about this. Once you get married, a couple legally have to share the same last name. So of course, most of the time is the woman taking up the husband's last name. So then
Sure.
this name will show in company systems. Now, if this woman, first of all, this woman already feels she has lost her identity because she has to use her husband's last name. Now, let's think about this. What if this woman gets divorced? Then her last name would change in the system. So now it would trigger the change, and everybody can see this woman is now divorced. So there, this very interesting
Which can, uh, yeah, bring
dynamic,
up a lot of
right? Yeah,
additional attention and
stretch.
questions
Yes,
and feelings. Yes.
yes.
Okay.
So
Wow. Over something that seems so simple, but it's
yes,
not.
exactly. And there is in a way, simple solution. If we let people choose to use their preferred name and show that in systems, then that will alleviate a lot of these stress. So at Pfizer, we have turned on the preferred name feature in a lot of our platforms, and we'll continue to expand that. And the most interesting thing, I think, is actually we think about names. A lot of people, you don't have to be a transgender person. You don't have to be a Japanese woman. You may just want people to call you a certain name, James, Jimmy, Jim. I'm sure some of our
Jay?
yeah, and some people may say, "Oh, if you call me by my official like name, James, that reminds me of my mother yelling at me when I was a child. I've made a
When I'm in
mistake."
trouble.
Yeah. So I think again, this rising tide lifts all boats. What we're trying to do for one
Mhm.
group of people, it could really help a lot of people. So again, that's the beauty of inclusion. All right, I'll
Okay.
share my seventh and the last idea.
Okay.
So I
These
talked
have been
about.
awesome. So we can't wait to hear number 7.
All right, I hope it's a good one too.
No doubt.
So when I talked about intersectionality, I stressed it's really about thinking about how with different identities we may get compound challenges, and you think about the opposite is when you are not in those, you don't have those identities, then you have privilege. So I think it's great that if we can maybe for a second suspend the fatigue or even this feeling, oh, the word privilege is such a buzzword these days. If you can suspend all that negativity about this word and just think about what it really means, um, then I think we can all see we do have privilege. Honestly, for all of us here, if you are in this conference, I am sure you have some kind of privilege, one way or another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read 19 statements. I didn't make this up. This is from Lean In. Their allyship training. It's
Okay.
public resources they have
Okay.
generously offered to the public, so you can Google it later. So I'm going
Mhm.
to read 19 statements, and you can grab a pen or make a mental note. Which of these statements apply to you? Okay, I'm going to start reading.
Okay. So,
I
I'm sorry. So you want the audience to do this right now?
Yeah, just think about it in your own
Okay.
head. You
And
can
how
type
many
in
of
the
these
chat.
apply to them?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
If you want, you can type in the chat as well. But I'm going to read you 19 statements. Okay, the
Yeah,
first
that would
one.
be fun. Yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I have rarely been disrespected or denied an opportunity because of my skin color. Second, I am usually not the only person of my race in a room. Third statement, I can expect there will be a public bathroom available that aligns with my gender. I can assume that people won't think I am incompetent or helpless because of the way I look. I see my experience reflected in movies and television shows. I am not used to regularly being followed or questioned in a store. I don't fear for my safety when interacting with the police.
I don't feel
I don't fear for my safety
fear.
when I'm interacting with the police.
Okay, thank you.
I am not usually mocked for my accent. I have never been asked, "Where are you really from?" I am not asked to explain or define my sexual orientation or gender. People refer to me by the right pronoun. I don't regularly avoid certain places because I'm worried about my safety or about being sexually harassed. I expect chairs or public seating to be comfortable for my body. I don't feel pressured to spend significant time or money on my appearance. I don't think twice about mentioning the gender of my partner or spouse, regardless of whom I'm talking to. My religion's holidays are commonly marked on work or school calendars. I don't often worry whether a new environment is physically safe or accessible. I'm not typically disrespected or denied opportunities because of my religion. And the last one, my parents help pay for my education. All right. So I
Wow.
wonder,
Wow.
yeah.
So, if anyone identified with any of those statements, how about if you just put a one in the chat so that we can see how many of you did, or if you want to put a comment
Or
with,
you can put, yeah. Or
yeah,
Erica, I'm
please.
thinking maybe people can put a number in there if they feel like
Sure,
6 or 8 or all of them.
sure, sure.
So
If you all,
one, or you can put whatever. Yeah.
sure. If you all recall which number relates to the statement that you
Or
relate
just
to, then please do. But I see a lot of ones here. I see a lot of ones here. Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for that information. Thank you so much. Let's go to the audience for a question. I saw, well, oh my goodness, I'm scrolling back through all these ones. Wow. Someone's asking for the list of questions, so that could be great too. Um, how can Catherine says, how can folks not in DEI uplift lesser heard voices?
I think the exercise that we just did that helped us realize we all have some kind of privileges, and you don't have to be in DEI every day when you interact with your colleagues. Um, if you're a hiring manager, for instance, then you can make sure you check your bias. You can make sure you work with your talent acquisition team to reach people of different backgrounds. So qualify the best talent comes from diversity. So you can hire the best candidates because you have a diverse slate of candidates. That's just one easy example. Or you can join an employee resource group. You can learn to be a better ally. You can support others. Or a lot of times your company or your ERGs may do volunteer work, community service. Of course, you can be a part of that. There's just endless ways for you to be a better ally to others.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I see one person unfortunately said, I think just about all of these items. So I think that you've really, really hit on something here, Quinnie. So thank you so much for that. How about one more question before we wrap up? Because everybody is not buying into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not everyone believes in it. And it's relatively new in the business world, if you will. Um, but how do you address pushback or resistance? from
Mm.
people or groups who may not understand the importance of intersectionality in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts?
Um, Thank you for asking that question. I honestly believe if you ask people, uh, do you agree? Do you believe in equality? People would say yes. Do you
Of course.
believe in
Yes
equity?
or no?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's maybe it's the definition of equality or equity or how you deliver equity or equality that people cannot agree on, and we understand that. Um, I think once you really get through to people, you help people understand what we mean by intersectionality. I talked about the two extremes of misconceptions. Once you get through that, I think a lot of people can see the beauty of intersectionality. Um, if we want to talk about why people do not support DEI, that would take another whole 40 minutes or 40 weeks or 40 years to talk about that. So we can't do
Sure.
that now. But I think if we assume people have good intention and we can have honest, open discussion, I think we can continue down this road. And I want to really talk for one more minute, talk
Mm-hmm.
about for those of us here who actually agree intersectionality is important and we want to do more, then how can we challenge ourselves to do more? I think a lot of times when we think about
Mm-hmm.
DEI, typically they're different maturity models. They may be called different things, but I think the idea is similar. The typical stages may be aware, compliant, tactical, integrated, sustained, the typical stages. You may
Okay.
call it different things, but it's all about maybe starting from not even being aware of the different DI challenges to actually being legally compliant. Then maybe you have different programs, very programmatic, tactical, and then you become integrated, part of your daily work, and then it's sustained. If a leader leaves, you still have this DI work in there. So now I want to challenge ourselves already doing this. When even if you feel you're already at a more advanced stage, integrated or even maybe sustained, do
Mm-hmm.
you have that intersectionality lens? When you think you're doing great work for a certain group, are you still looking at it very broad stroke? Or are you really getting deep in there to look at the individual experiences of people within that broader group? I think if we challenge ourselves, we can do even better work.
Absolutely. If we challenge ourselves. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. As we are wrapping up, I would love to hear from the audience. What have been your really key insight from this discussion that we've had here today? We would love to shout out a few of those as we are concluding. And as you're doing that, let me just say a great big thank you to everyone for joining us today for this insightful discussion and conversation. I certainly learned a lot. And I wrote down, we can't divide ourselves into different categories because we are a multitude of different dimensions, and all of it's important, and we should be able to express ourselves and be respected and to belong, particularly at work, because you have the right to do good work and to do a job that you're skilled at doing. So thank you so much for that. I see. So you're welcome. Lots and lots of thank yous coming through. So any insights, please. Continuing the work beyond one leader is so critical. I love that. I love that. That was, let's see, who was that? Thank you, Jessica. Anyone else? Thank you, Miss Eloise. We all need to be more insightful, dig deeper, and ask the harder questions. Yes, indeed, we do. Okay, thank you so much for that. Quinnie, thank you for sharing your valuable insights and experiences.
Oh,
Um,
thank you,
Thank you
Erica.
so
I
much.
guess
You're
my
so
last thing I want to call with like 30 seconds is to, we always use the word whole self, bring your whole self to work in DI as a DI lingo. But if we really think our whole self is comprised of all the different multiple identities, let's
yep,
really bring all these
yep.
identities in so we can thrive. Thank you.
So you just said something else profound. So I love the we, so that we can thrive. Absolutely. So very, very quickly, please connect with me, audience. If you would like to, on LinkedIn, I'm at Erica B. Walls. If you do, and you put in your invitation, Inspiration Summit, I will send you a resource that can help you to evaluate organizations before you go to work there. Many of them are on the good diversity list, by the way. So, last thing, coming up next, you don't want to miss our keynote interview with Alicia Menendez, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend. Alicia will share valuable insight from her book, The Likeability Trap: How to Break Free and Succeed as You Are, and her advice for women in the workplace. Don't want to miss it. Thank you so much.